do this quickly and then hopefully leave time at the end where we can open it up to discussion. Because I just want to create like a 20-minute review here for everybody that's missing. And if you have to listen to it again, it will be fairly short. So let's go ahead and just do that. So I'm going to blast through the cases with no debate, which is ridiculous because this is one we should debate, but we'll come back and debate at the end. Okay, so again, this will be just the review, and then we'll have debate time hopefully at the end of the period. Okay, so we're talking about the First Amendment, and the First Amendment is, of all the amendments in the Constitution, the most litigated, that means tested in court, of any. And it makes sense, it would be, because there's no clear lines here. I'm trying to teach you guys the thing that there's not a bright line sometimes. And so like with the voucher thing, or with the, can parochial schools use public money to educate their children? Yes, if they keep it to the secular and not the religious, and they separate the two, literally physically separate the two, and in their accounting and what they pay for. The salaries, everything has got to be handled in so they need a good accountant basically. But that might seem like a gray area to some people. You know, if a religious school set up, maybe the religion should pay all the bills and not the taxpayer. But by the same token, where would those kids go? If they weren't in that school, they'd have to go to another school and taxpayers would still be paying. I don't know where the line is there. Okay, I do know that the Supreme Court has allowed it. Okay, and that's with this issue too. We went down a list and we used kind of a Socratic method here. If you start saying a prayer in school, which I did when I was a child, the first day of school, there would be a big assembly in the lunchroom. You know, that's where little kids sit there, you know, in their bike class, and they go through, you do a pledge, you do a prayer, there'd be a motivational thing, and then off to class, right? And it was just every year. Usually they threw in a movie and a cartoon. That was always fun too. But the point of the matter is that all of a sudden, one year they didn't do the prayer. And you're going, did somebody forget the prayer? Little kids don't know that there's Supreme Court decisions being made, right? And so this is a very nuanced discussion. And as the Supreme Court worked through the issues, can you have prayers at UCAS? Well, obviously we don't, so I guess we can't, right? And public schools, can they have non-denominational prayers? In other words, let's make a neutral prayer that everybody can be happy with. Well, we know that you're never going to satisfy everybody, are you? And can public schools require Bible readings? Parochial schools can, private schools can, but public schools, if it's for religious instruction, if you're pulling out a passage from the Old Testament that talks about the flood epic, and you're doing the epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, then that would be totally appropriate because it's part of what? History. But to teach it as a religious thing, well, that's where the separation appears to be. Then people said, well, if can't do prayers, can't do Bible reads, can't do the scripture thing, let's just do a moment of silence and kids will know what to do with that. The intent was to provide time for prayer, right? I mean, that was the intent. So the Supreme Court said no to that too, right? But we do know that there's a carve out for people who have to go through a ceremony when they pray. Muslims, for example. Who do you need?
Amelia, but after class.
Amelia, okay. After class, Amelia, okay. Great counselor, by the way, does a great job, doesn't he? He's really good, isn't he? Anyway, he just heard that, I hope, because he's really cool. I like the guy a lot. Anyway, here's the thing. If you're Muslim, for example, and you have to, or if you're Hasidic Jewish, and there's a certain time to pray and a certain ceremony involved, you can't pull out your prayer mat in the middle of the classroom, right? So providing a place is okay. Look, the lines are blurry here, right? And this is the case that sets the precedent. And this is the case I left out yesterday for the other classes. And this is New York Board of Regents, 1962. That's why I remember it so well, because I was, like I said, an elementary kid. It violated the First Amendment by requiring a prayer that was even non-denominational there in the city of New York, right? Okay, so public schools cannot require Bible readings either because it has a religious intent. And here's the language of the ruling. The schools must maintain a strict neutrality if it's paid for by public taxpayer dollars. You can't tip the scales, favor one religion over another. And even a non-denominational prayer, you guys realize that when anybody says a prayer, are they going to kind of default to what they've been taught? And when you hear a prayer, can you kind of tell which church it's coming from? You can. As one student in last period pointed out, some prayers are recited from a book of prayer, and others, kind of ad lib it as they go. But there's always phrases, and there's ways to start, there's ways to end, and there's phrases that are used that are tells that it's one religion over another. This again is blurry ground, but here's the bottom line. The school can neither aid nor oppose religion. It would be just as wrong for somebody to get up there and start espousing atheism. That would be just as wrong. You stay out of it. It's not your role. Your role is to worry about math, science, and so on. Now, here's the thing. The moment of silence was eventually struck down in Alabama too, because the intent in Alabama was to replace a prayer. But do we do moment of silences, for example, for 9/11, and we should be doing one today, Pearl Harbor Day, right? Yeah, December 7th. If it's for a memorial, you can do a moment of silence. If it's for a religious intent, then you can't. I know that one kind of makes a little bit of sense. But here's the deal. If this case were heard by the current Supreme Court, would they have decided this the same way? Probably not. Maybe they wouldn't even have heard the case, and they would have let whatever was happening continue. Here's the deal. The court that decided most of these precedents was a very liberal court that was composed during the 1960s, during the whole civil rights era and all this kind of stuff, when the country was in a very, very liberal mood. And, right, these precedents came out. Now, we talked about yesterday this in this class, I'm sure we talked about President Trump's biggest legacy, the thing he leaves behind, more than any president since the 1960s, has reshaped the court since John Kennedy. No president gets to choose 3 justices in 4 years. That just never, ever happens. But it happened on his watch, proving once again that elections have what? Consequences. Had Hillary Clinton won, we'd have a court of 9 that would have been 3 very different judges. So this whole thing, right, is kind of a big deal, because a lot of the cases we're saying are precedent now. The stare decisis may be challenged by the current court that believes maybe, I don't know if they do or not, but that maybe these cases were decided wrongly to begin with. I don't know. But I do know the Pledge of Allegiance case, right? This one was fascinating. This had the potential to blow the country up again. You hate the flag, you hate the country, da 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 da. Anyway, on and on and on it goes. This whole deal of whether or not, is the pledge a prayer because of the words under God, which were added later. The facts of the case are that it was added in the 1950s to prove a point that we're not godless like the communists in Soviet Union and China. Does it make us look autocratic when we force everybody to say it? In other words, kind of what they are? And it gets in all sorts of issues. What about burning the flag in public? Whoa, that's a whole new territory. But the idea, let's stick with the religious issue first. Is it a prayer? Okay, well, now here's the deal. The district court in California said it was. I'm just reviewing, right? They said those words obviously say that here's an atheist father suing 3rd, 4th grade student being forced to say this. This is not what we believe, okay? So you're picking a side. You're putting a thumb on belief in God versus my view, the father's view. Okay, so of atheism. Okay, well, here's the thing. The appeals court upheld it too. The Supreme Court had to hear this case then. They were kind of pushed into it because we had cross-regional differences now. This is not the decision that was reached in the 5th Circuit in Texas, okay? Nor the one here in Colorado. So they heard the case, and this is the fascinating part of this case. They dodged it. They did not answer the question. They found a technicality that the father did not have custody of that child because they were divorced, and the mother was given custody. So only she could sue because she had, here's the key word you have to know, standing. You have to be harmed by a law before you could sue on it. If you don't like a law, you can't just sue. You have to actually be impacted by that law. The mom had custody over the child. Therefore, she could have brought the suit, but she didn't. It was the father who didn't have custody. So they said he has no, here's the actual word, no standing to bring this case. So the case was thrown out on a technicality. Dodging what? The issue. Deftly, I might add. I don't think they'll ever hear a case. Maybe this court will, though. So now it's a patchwork all over the country, different things. We do know that someone cannot be forced to say the pledge. This happened in 1943, West Virginia State Board of Education, Barnett, when certain religious groups, I told you the story, did I not, of the little 8th grade student that came to my little computer class who was Seventh-day Adventist, right? And he was embarrassed, let's be honest. I mean, peer pressure is a thing, right? So we just struck a deal. Hey, just be 2-3 minutes late every Monday morning, right? And then as soon as the prayer's done, come on in. And, you know, great kid, straight A's. I mean, you know, this is, but he felt the peer pressure. He just wanted to go through that every single week, you know. Peer pressure isn't an issue for you, right? Did we go through the Osmond Amendment where you have the right to remain silent and sit, right? That needs to be taught to you. Every class actually should have a sign. You don't have to say the pledge, right? They need to quote West Virginia Barnett, but we don't. I got a 9th grade teacher right now teaching a subject, and it's turned to chaos. 9th graders, half the class isn't standing for the pledge. Now, we saw this, of course, when the Vietnam War was on, 1960s and through 1970s, when Nixon was being impeached. But since then, as long as I've been teaching, it's never been an issue. If there's a religious exemption, we all understand that, and whatever, but it was never used as a free speech First Amendment thing until about 4 years ago now. And I didn't know how to handle it either. This poor teacher, you know how he's handling it? Saying the pledge before the bell rings. So it's not an issue. Okay, let's prove the point. You ready? Join me in the pledge. Those that wish to, and those that don't wish to. Right? First Amendment. Here we go. Let's say the pledge. Ready? It's, you know, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, last class, more were sitting than standing. And in my early morning class, it's about 2/3, 1/3. This should be celebrated. Are you guys talking amongst yourselves as to why you're not standing and sitting? I got one student takes a knee every time, making a very distinctive protest every time the pledge is said, every day. Right? If you know anything about Kaepernick and that whole situation in the NFL. Have you talked about it? Have you been curious enough to ask, hey, you know, are you standing for the pledge? Why? What's the thing? What's the issue? Because here's what I'm going to teach you right now. I think it's very important. The First Amendment invites us to have unique opinions and not to be a bunch of ditto heads agreeing with everything that people, you know, say and tell them what to think. It's an invitation to have a discussion. Look, we got 320 million people, 320 million people whose minds are born what? Free. And they're all going to reach different conclusions. So a lot of people think, yeah, everybody thinks like I do. It's so fun down in St. George, you know, you get these older people, and everybody thinks like us. I'm good. No, they don't. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, you know, come to my poli-sci class. None of them think like you do. Okay. But you're in a little bubble. So you just think, you know, because the 5 people you interact with every day think like you do, that they don't either. If they actually got into the nuances of how they're thinking, nobody has the same. The First Amendment invites us to think and then to express ourselves in a civil way, non-violently, with respect, like it says in the Osmond Amendment in the state law, that we have respect for those that stand and those that sit in equal measure. But shouldn't you have a conversation as to why amongst yourselves? Instead of the class I was telling you about, where this group of students refused to stand no matter what, and a group sat over here and literally shouted the pledge, trying to shame them into standing. That was interesting. So I just quit saying the pledge, and I think I was wrong to do that. First of all, it's a violation of state law. But then the other part is that, you know what? Both sides should have been given their speech rights, but then I should have been much more careful about the respect part. But it caught me off guard, to be honest. I mean, there was legitimate animosity there. And I bet they didn't even have a clue what the other person was upset about. They never talked. It was, you stand because I'm standing, or you sit because I'm sitting. And there was no middle ground. Well, there was a group of students in the middle going, what do I do? Yeah, go ahead, take it.
Another thing in terms of people thinking differently and being able to disagree is the internet has been able to propel.
Yeah,
in a huge way
I know.
because,
I agree with you.
There's been a lot of
Yeah.
data that goes to show that people who live in similar regions tend to think differently on.
Oh, that's so
the
true.
majority of issues.
Where you live, is all politics local? Let me jump to this. I don't think I showed you the Osmond Amendment. Did I not? Did I show you this? This is the law that was one thing for 50 years. And that's what we're going to start the school week with a prayer. Excuse me, sorry, pledge. Okay, start the school week with a pledge once a week at the beginning of school. That was changed in the law. Now it's to each student should be informed. Basically, now they're going to do it each day. And it was limited to once a week in elementary school only. High schools and middle schools had the option. Now it's in every public school, K-12. This is how the law was amended. All right, but then this person here, Senator Osmond, said, yeah, this is never going to pass the Supreme Court. This is not going to work. So they added this: each student shall be informed by posting a notice in conspicuous place at the time student has the right not to participate in reciting the pledge. Do you see that in any of the classrooms? So it looks like nobody's bothered to read the law. So people should be taught that it's a First Amendment right to stand or to sit. A student shall be excused from reciting the pledge upon written request. Have any of you gotten written requests? I asked the class where half the class didn't stand. Where's the written request? From your parents. Nobody's doing that either. This law needs to be restructured. But nevertheless, it is constitutional because it's saying these things, right? But nobody's doing it. Okay, not only is it acceptable for someone to choose not to participate in the pledge for religious or other reasons, maybe you're just tired. Who knows? But students should show respect for any student who chooses not to participate. And that right there is the key word right there, respect. And that's in the state law. Now that part should stay, but I think they need to look at this law as it really happens in practice. And what's happened since, 9/11, after 9/11, yeah, everybody's standing for the pledge, but you know what? We're in a different time. So if I hadn't shown you that, I think you should check it out. I should put that link up there for you because it's a fascinating law. Now, how many cases? Oh, this one. Did we do this one? No, we didn't, right? Okay, let's do it quickly. Can you burn a flag in protest? Well, a kid did. That was the kid in Texas. He got arrested, of course, in Texas because Texas was one of 48 states that had basically you can't desecrate the US flag, period, right? Laws. And it was Texas versus Johnson, 1989. It invalidated those 48 state laws. Basically, Justice William Brennan holding that the defendant Gregory Lee Johnson's act of flag burning was protected speech under the First Amendment because he was at a protest and he had a statement to make. It was a 5-4 decision. Would this court make the same decision? Question worth asking, is it not? But here's the deal. See that flag there? I feel like I've done this. Have I done this yet? Don't burn that flag because that's my flag, my personal property. Leave it alone, okay? Don't just grab it one day and go out and burn it in the parking lot. First of all, okay, you better buy your own flag, right? But then you need to do something else. You need to say, okay, here's our protest. Get a permit for the protest so it can be done safely, right? Especially if you're going to go out on the street, march on the street, and contact the fire department for a permit to burn something at the protest so that a fire officer can be there with a fire extinguisher so you don't accidentally blow up someone's car or burn a building down, or even burn a person accidentally who gets too close to it. Look, safety matters. And cities can say, look, you can't just start a fire anywhere you want. So you need to get that fire permit too. And that'll protect you and the protest and everybody. And then you can go ahead and burn away. But you want that fire officer there with the fire extinguisher. Is that good advice? I'm thinking it is. Can you fly the flag upside down if you're protesting? Yes, it's happened so many times. But you see protest flags right now all the time. I don't know what to think of flags that suddenly don't have the red, white, and blue, but they're black and white with different stripes in them. Those are protest flags too. Protected by the First Amendment? Yeah. I kind of like the color scheme we have right there, but a lot of people want to, I don't know what it is about those flags, but I do know that it is protected speech. Flags are interesting things. Okay, now, what's the purpose of the Bill of Rights? So the bottom line of this whole lecture comes down to this. The thing is we learned from our Greeks in Athens is that the majority can protect itself. You guys remember the demagogues, right? And all that, and the whole Sicilian thing and whatever. The majority gets its way. They can pass laws that protect their rights. They don't need a Bill of Rights. They're in the majority. They can make the laws to protect their own rights. What the Bill of Rights is there for is to protect the minority from the majority. How can your minority opinion, if it's not allowed to be heard, ever become the majority opinion? The whole history of this country is people changing their minds over time. And if you can't have a discussion, then whoa, what's the point? Look, but states could take away your rights. And I gave you the case of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Missouri, literally being thrown out by gunpoint with an extermination order in the 1830s. Could that happen today? Could that happen today? No, and why? Who had the authority to kick them out at gunpoint? The state government. So up until 1868, the 14th Amendment, states could take away human rights. They could persecute the minority. How do you think slavery was maintained? Not at a national level, at a state level. It was South Carolina that enslaved people by their laws. You should read some of these laws. They're totally creepy. But it was the law in that state. In 1868, they passed the 14th Amendment, said a state can't take away your basic rights. Whoa, that's what makes this the most important amendment in the Constitution. Look, had it been 1869 and a religious group in Missouri was feeling threatened at gunpoint, the National Guard would have been there so fast to protect them to make your head spin. That's the difference the 14th Amendment can make. Now, what about religious displays? We're coming into the Christmas season. I love these cases. You ready? Let's do some. During the Christmas holiday, notice I used the word Christmas here. can you have a manger scene in the middle of town? Maybe in front of the, oh, I don't know, the city building or the city library or whatever. Can you have a manger display? You know, that live thing, you know, where you have characters and the wise men come in and all that stuff. Can you do that? There's still 2 towns in Utah that do it every year. But here's the deal. It was denied by the Supreme Court. Also said that you can't just place 10 commandments everywhere on public property. So here was the case. Manger scene or the 10 commandment displays on public property? No, because it has a religious purpose. The question simply was this: does it have a religious purpose or is it part of a seasonal celebration? Either way, this is when we went from calling it Christmas to calling it Xmas. Now, some people say, hey, that's a war on Christmas and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is that it does place Christian religion in a favored spot, because do you see any Hanukkah celebrations? Do you see any Bhagavad Gita stuff coming out with Krishna stuff? Do you see a celebration of Buddha? So it's putting the thumb on the scale, according to the court. And they also said, you can't have a manger scene at the courthouse, but Christmas tree's okay, you can do that. Any inconsistency there? And oh, by the way, would the current court decide this the same way if it gets revisited? This will be interesting to see. But what's the deal with the Christmas tree? What's the origin of the Christmas tree? What's the origin of Xmas? It was never a Christian holiday. It was a what holiday? A pagan holiday. It was one that was celebrated around the world, right? Because it's the longest night of the year. And in Rome, it was the celebration of Sol Invictus, the return of the sun god on with his 4-horse chariot. And basically it meant the crops were going to return and we were all going to go back from, you know, death to life if you're an Egyptian. The whole point is this became a thing because it was the shortest day of the year. And every day after that was going to get warmer and warmer and warmer, and agriculture was going to bring life back to the earth. So it was a pagan holiday. And the Romans loved this holiday. They were the ones that did the gift giving. They were the ones that, made a big party of it, really kind of a raucous, wild party, to be honest with you. And so here it is, a pagan holiday that we still celebrate, but it's been rebranded. Who rebranded it and why? Didn't you get this in your world history? It was Pope Gregory, who's telling, the local priests and that are saying, look, they're doing this party and this wild revelry and it's just da. He says, look, you're not going to stomp this one out. This is so popular that it's, and you're just irritating people. Why don't we give it a new spin? Let's make it more of a Christian celebration, kind of take some of the craziness out of it. By the way, what is the real holiday for Christians? The one that's the sacred, most religious one. It's Easter. Was Christ born at Christmas time? Not a chance. It was spring, right? You guys know your biblical teachings more than I do, probably. Some of you. But I've been told it was springtime. So it was an accommodation made. And the tree itself, the Christmas tree, was a Germanic tradition that goes back forever. So we allow a pagan Christmas tree, but we don't allow, never mind. I think these are tough cases, but we do know too, the 10 Commandments as part of a display of history is okay. For example, Texas was sued because they had 10 Commandments in the rotunda. And they basically won the case because the whole point of the rotunda was to talk about the history of laws. Have I talked about the 10 Commandments ever? Right? You can't understand laws unless you bring it into Hammurabi's Code, 10 Commandments, go down the list, Justinian's Code. We talk about that history. As long as it's to teach history, it's okay. However, if you slap a 10 Commandments down as a religious statement on public property, that's not okay. This was a Kentucky case that was decided that. Now, this guy in Alabama was a justice on the Supreme Court of Alabama and decided to test the theory. Here he is later in life, running for the Senate of Alabama, never made it. But this guy becomes one of the most controversial people in legal history. His name is Judge Roy Moore. And I think he actually ran again for a Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. I don't know if he won that or not, but here's what he did. Once the court decided that, the 10 Commandments as a religious display, you got to get it out of public space, he decided to order a 5,280-pound monument of the 10 Commandments and stuck it right in his judicial building, right in the entryway, like, make me stop. Well, he got sued, and sure enough, the federal court said, you got to take it down. Stare decisis, precedent set. He refused, so they relieved him of his judgeship. You can't defy a court order from a federal court, even if you're on the Alabama Supreme Court. Now, this monument itself was removed and put into a private spot where it's now a part of a museum thing, because this is history, right? This is a history of the 10 Commandments, as is this one. Now, how many of you live near Pleasant Grove? How many pass the Purple Turtle on a daily basis? By the way, the food's still great, right? I mean, I love that place. Okay, but here's the deal. Go up a little further and go to the right, and there's a wonderful Daughters of the Utah Pioneers Museum. It's brilliant. Okay, it's really good. The whole park and everything else, it's a pioneer kind of celebration of early settlement and whatever else. Things that were brought over, and that. It's just great. If you love history, which I do. You can even find the outline of the original fort, and some of the houses in one section of Pleasant Grove are the oldest houses built in the valley. It's quite a tour if you know what to take it on. But there's also this 10 Commandment slab. You got to kind of enter the park, go past the building, and just kind of walk backwards. And there it is. Boom. Right? Now, there was a group called the Summum out of Salt Lake, and they have a pyramid-shaped temple. They do Egyptian religion. Okay? Yeah. Complete with mummification of their pets and things like that. I don't know much about them, but I do know they objected to this 10 Commandments in that public park. It's a city park. So they said, we want to put our religious teachings right next to it. A little pyramid, belief statement, put it right there. If you allow that, you have to allow us. This 10 Commandments was doomed to be removed. Blocked in federal court, appeals court. Yeah. It went to the 10th Circuit in Denver, and then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then ruled this way. I love this decision, by the way. As an historian, I love this. Cities can select monuments that reflect local aesthetics, history, or culture. It's a pioneer museum, for heck's sake, right? It's not a religious statement. It's a historical statement. And there was no ruling on the Establishment Clause that this right here was establishing a religious preference for the city of Pleasant Grove. The problem is the lawyers for the Summum missed the entire point. They should have gone after the Establishment Clause at the time. They're back in court trying to see if they can revise this one. I don't know, the Supreme Court will ever hear it again. This ruling, by the way, I love that. So this what I'm saying now is separate from this ruling. But you go look at that 10 Commandments. It is not, was it hauled across the plains by the pioneers and plopped there? No. It was part of an effort out of Washington State, I believe, to put the 10 Commandments in every community because we were in the Cold War and we had to appear, that we have God on our side and we're fighting the communists. It was a group out of Washington or Oregon that got the city to say, yeah, okay, you can put one of them here. They were everywhere. And it's the Jewish version of the 10 Commandments. Something the pioneers probably wouldn't have carved it this way.
Which is also furthermore not part of the majority.
Well, there you go. That's true. But here's the point. This park is about pioneer heritage, not about the Cold War. But it's still there. It survives. It's one of the key cases. This is one of the important decisions of the Supreme Court. communities can chill a little bit, and if it fits their history and culture and local aesthetics, go to it. And we're not going to litigate every single case over every single little violation that somebody might have. And by the way, there's no room for another monument anyway. If you can imagine 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 15, 20 different, the poor family that lives across here has a little fence separate. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness. Go visit sometime. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Go, just walk back by the big pine tree. You'll see it. Okay. You can touch history. It's really, really interesting. How many seen these roadside crosses? Yeah. You guys seen this? You're not driving along the freeway, see a cross there? Okay. What's it to celebrate, commemorate? By the way, I think the number is actually 21 now. I need to update this slide. But what is it commemorating? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's one in like southern Utah that's kind of supposed to commemorate, I believe it's.
Well, let me tell you if you don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Who's died in the line of duty on our nation's roads, freeways? With Highway Patrol. Some of them unfortunately been hit by cars as they get out of their car or they're there and car veers into them. That's why we now have a law that if you see somebody pulled over, you have to pull into this lane and then pull back again. Honestly, we could give our police officers a highway patrol, put the wheel on the other side of the car so they're getting out that side instead of getting out this side. Simple solution. But by the same token, it's been a deal. So we had to pass a law to make sure people do that. But then also too, right? Some were just killed in the line of duty. The last one I remember was in Delta. She was patrolling the road and there was, she pulled a car over for speeding or whatever. And they were running drugs and they just killed her flat out. And it was just terrible. And so it's appropriate that we honor them in some way. The problem with this was the establishment clause. What symbol did the private group that raised the money to build these, what did they just choose to do? A cross, right? I don't even think there was any intent to that. They just say, hey, we're gonna have a memorial, let's put a cross up, put the symbol of the highway patrol there and put the officer's name. But it does represent which religion. So based on the establishment clause, it fails the coercion test. In other words, you're forced to see the Christian symbols as you drive along the road. It's not your choice. That's the same thing with the prayer, the flag, all that. This coercion, do you feel coerced, right? If you don't believe that symbol. By the way, not all the officers were Christian either. So, wait a minute, they were ordered to be removed. How come you still see them? Why are they still there? Because they're not there. This group just very smartly, and I think this shows Utah pragmatism, went to the nearest, the landowner, and here's the freeway, right? And then here's the fence, and here's the farmer's land. And they said, can we just move it over here onto your private property? And they all said, yes, of course. And so they just moved them about 10, 20 feet sometimes. So that's why you still see them. One guy in southern Utah owned a business right along the freeway. He decided to take all of those that were in that stretch right there and put a big display. So when you're coming out of St. George, you'll see them off to your right. And I think it's great that we honor the fallen officers. I think we do. The problem, of course, on public property was having it to be a symbol that represents one church over another. Does that make sense? But you still see them because they're all on now what? Private property. Yeah, yeah. Now we get to the biggest case of the year. And I've never gotten to this point in this lecture where history's being made right now. This precedent goes back to 1973. It's been the stare decisis. It was affirmed again and again and again in cases like Casey, which we talked about, but now there's a legitimate challenge to it. And you need to know the name of the case that we talked about, right? Out of Mississippi. This court is a different court. All the cases we just talked about, those precedents, they may not stand. Or maybe they do. I don't know. But I know we haven't had a truly conservative court since the 1930s. And now we do. And here's an issue where it really blew up on President Obama. And let's go through this one quickly. Obamacare made contraceptives available without a copay. So you didn't have to pay a fee to go to the doctor to get your contraception or whatever. But the Roman Catholic Church, who runs one of the largest hospital systems in the country, objected to it. They don't believe they should be providing contraceptives at all. But the question is, well, wait a minute, in your hospitals and whatever, do you have employees that you're giving healthcare to that aren't Catholic? Are you denying them this? It blew up. I mean, it really, really blew up. Okay, so here's how Obama dealt with it. And I thought he dealt with it really well with the presidential order because he diffused the crisis. He said, the churches don't have to provide it. The Roman Catholic Church, or any church for that matter, doesn't have to do that if it's against their religious principles. But the insurance companies that are private businesses making the money on all of this, they do. And so it's reimbursable through the insurance company. That's how they got around this very, very big issue. I mean, we had this group here. Let's see, what is it? The Little Sisters of the Poor, traveling the country, arguing about this. It blew up even more when the House of Representatives and the Senate decided to pass a law that would basically have undone Obamacare. It didn't pass. It was 51-49 vote. Any employer can deny contraceptives or other healthcare procedures for religious reasons. But what if you're a publicly traded company? Now, it might be one thing if you work for Hobby Lobby, this case is big, Burwell versus Hobby Lobby, that is owned and operated by a family with religious, that's their thing. For example, which one is it? In-N-Out Burger that has all the scriptures on the cups and stuff like that. It's a Christian family out of California, right? That's the one. I think Chick-fil-A, same way, right? Kind of thing. Well, it's a big issue. And so we've had cases, by the way, Hobby Lobby, yeah, they won that case, right? And that's interesting. But the insurance companies are not religions and they can't sue for religious objection. Now, the problem is in the hearing in the House, this is often called the War on Women's Health at the time, experts were brought in to testify to support this law. What's the problem with this picture? This is how the controversy ended, by the way. They pulled in 5 experts to testify, and they're all what? They're all men deciding a woman's issue. After some effort, one member of Congress got one woman to testify that contraception does more than deal with pregnancy issues, but it's life-saving for certain illnesses that some people have, including this girl's roommate. And oh my goodness, the fallout to her testimony in Congress was unbelievable. She got death threats and everything else. Obama called her up and said, no one should be vilified for being a good citizen, for speaking out on the issues in Congress. Doesn't matter your viewpoint, you have to respect another person's opinion. And when you use bullying and death threats and all of that to silence somebody else, you don't believe in the First Amendment and you don't believe in the Constitution either. It's everybody's right to say their opinion, including these panel here. They can speak, so can she. Let's be respectful, just like with the pledge. So if you believe in the First Amendment, first of all, prepare to be offended. Somebody's going to say something that you don't believe and you might offend you. But you have to respect their right as they should respect yours. The spirit of the First Amendment invites us to have different opinions, invites us all, every single person in this room. The mind is born free. And you should be able to express that without fear of retaliation or peer pressure or anything else. So that is what the First Amendment's about. It's respect. And it goes right back to that Osmond Amendment, the law in Utah where we say the pledge every day. That's the word. And a lot of people have forgotten that in recent times. So let's listen and not shout down. I mean, that's basically it. So that's my spiel on the First Amendment. I think it's elegantly written, brilliantly done. Congratulations to the first Congress who passed it.